Good afternoon and welcome to this edition of Plymouth Profiles. Plymouth Profiles is our opportunity to spend some time with someone local, and today we're delighted to have Plymouth State Representative Matthew Muratore. Matthew has been a state representative now for a period of time. We're going to let him tell us a little bit about that. So Matt, welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
Being here.
Yeah.
So Matt, I can't assume that everybody knows you and knows who you are. So
of course they do, Steve.
Tell us a little bit about your background and your family.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me back on again. I haven't seen you in a while, so it's good to be back. So I actually, I grew up in Caribou, Maine, and I tell this story real quick because I was born 10 minutes from the Canadian border, and my first name, Matthew, is spelled with one T. And most people, it's two T's. And my mother, being a young mother, thought because the French-Canadian way was M-A-T-H-I-E-U, that the American way was M-A-T-H-E-W. So I always tell that story to start off my personal life so that people will remember to spell my name the correct way.
Although I noticed that you have referred to yourself when you sign as Matt, it's M-A-T-T.
Correct. So M-A-T-T. Otherwise, it'd be a doormat if you did one T.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So, only, moved away when I was about 3 or 4, moved to the South Shore, lived in Brockton for a year, Whitman for a few years, and then grew up really in Rockland on the South Shore. Went to Cardinal Spellman High School, then went to Massasoit for a year. Went to Northeastern University, got my degree in business management.
My wife Noelle went to Northeastern.
Oh, did she? Yeah, great school, great school. And then during the co-op program at Northeastern, as you know, they have a good co-op program. I was at the Gillette Company in Boston for 9 years. Even after I graduated, they hired me full-time in their international division. And as you know, I have a nursing home background. My first job as a dishwasher and 16-year-old was a dishwasher at a nursing home. And I love working with the elderly. So I always did part-time work throughout the 80s there. And then decided, you know what, I want to leave Gillette and become a nursing home administrator. I want to run nursing homes. And I did that and received my license from the Commonwealth in 1991. And been running nursing homes ever since. And along the way, I picked up child daycare centers as well. As you know, I have 6 daughters. My wife, Kristen, and I live in Plymouth now.
So what brought you to Plymouth?
Which, yeah, it's funny. Kristen grew up in Falmouth. Family's still there. And I was in Rockland. So we figured, okay, what's the halfway point? And it was Plymouth. And really, South Plymouth was a halfway point. Yeah. At the time, back in 2000, the southern part of Plymouth was growing, tremendously. The Pine Hills had just started. But also the Ponds of Plymouth that had been established for a while, there was a new section called the Pine Hollow section that was being built by Pulte as well. So we ended up building a house down there. And the rest is history. All the kids have gone through the Plymouth Public Schools. And it became, you appointed me, I always tell this story. I said, people always ask, well, how'd you ever get involved? I said, Kristen worked with you as an attorney. And I remember you asking for, you were looking for somebody to go on the finance committee. And I didn't really know much about it, but you told me what it was about, and I got a business background. I said, sure. And so you appointed me in 2005, and then I became vice chair for a couple of years, and then a seat opened up on the Board of Selectmen, and I had a bunch of people that asked me to run for it. And in 2010, I ran and won for the Plymouth Board of Selectmen, became chair 2 of those years, and then lo and behold, the state rep seat opened up. Vinnie DiMacedo decided to run for the Senate because Therese Murray was retiring. And I was chair at the time, and that opened up, and the same people said, come on, let's run for this, and I did. And it's been 10 years now, believe it or not. This is my fifth term. Fifth term, yeah.
I was just talking to a candidate for select board, and we're talking about the current select board and how the newest member, Kevin Canty, has served on the finance committee.
Right.
And I observed what a great training that is to be on the select board. And what is your thought about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm so glad I did it this way because you have a great understanding of how the town operates. You also get to meet everyone in all the different positions in the town as well, because being the finance committee, the budgets come before you. So you got a full understanding of how the town works, how the budget works, how the people work. It was great interaction. So I'm so glad I did it that way. It made it, I wouldn't say seamless, but it was a lot. It was helpful that when I became a selectman, that I had that 5 years of background knowing how the town operated, in particular how it operated financially.
Now, when you think back to your service with the Board of Selectmen then, what sticks out in your mind as something that you're pleased about?
You know, there was something that I always said I would do, and I think I still do to this day. I know I still do this today. I would always say I will always do the right thing, what I think is the right thing to do, and not the politically correct thing to do. And there was a couple of meetings. I can't remember the specifics of them, but that I thought coming into a meeting I was going to vote one way until you actually listen to everyone on both sides. And I would change my mind. And Wedge Bramhall, never forget, God love him.
Yeah,
God rest his soul. I remember him coming up to me after a meeting one time, and again, I don't remember the specific issue, but he said to me, I can't believe that you changed your mind. I said, well, I really didn't change my mind. I was thinking one way, but I wanted to hear the debate.
Sure.
But, you know, that told me a lot that, you know, people want somebody that's a leader that's willing to listen. And willing to compromise and willing to, you know, to work what's best. It may not be the most popular decision sometimes, but at least I think people will respect your decision if it's well thought through.
So you left the select board and you ran for state rep and won. It's been 10 years. So tell us about the early years of state rep.
A little bit harder because it's all about, we're in a people business, Steve, as you know. And getting to know people in government, particularly colleagues, both in the House and the Senate, people within the administration. There was a learning curve there, and you know it probably takes 2 or 3 years of that learning curve just to get to know your way around, know who to talk to about what. But again, having the background in Plymouth, being on the Finance Committee, and being on the Select Board, I think, you know, made it that much easier at least. I couldn't imagine without having that background what it would have been like becoming a state rep. But yeah, it's a people business, and it's been great. We've been able to get a lot done by working together with people, and you know, and that's what it's all about. It's not, it maybe not be as popular nowadays because it's we're so polarized as a nation when it comes to politics, but I still believe in, you know, working with people to get things done is the best thing to do.
So in my adult life, I've spent all my time in Plymouth, you know, both in the school committee and as moderator. You have moved from being on the FinCom and the Select Board to now being a state representative. It's got to be different. I mean, because my focus is only here, and you're up in Boston. So, I mean, how do you, and yet you're still currently only representing Plymouth. So
right, exactly.
How does that work?
It's funny. I always, over the years, I've kidded people that I'm the sixth selectman because, you know, there's only a handful of the 160 state reps. There's only a handful that only represent one community, and I'm one of them. And so I've always felt that, you know, I half kid about being a sixth selectman, but I always felt like I was an extension of the town because I only represent the town. And in theory, I only represent 3/4 of the town. But it doesn't matter to me. If somebody's from Plymouth and they need something, I don't say, oh, wait a minute, are you in Kathy Lenatra's district or are you in my district? Where do you live? We don't do that. Right. They live in Plymouth, who deal with Plymouth. So in that case, it's been kind of seamless because, again, I feel like I'm still part of Plymouth because it's not in another community.
Now, in the legislature, you're a member of a party that's in the minority. Mm-hmm. How do you work through that?
Yeah, well, I think it's, as I said earlier, it's a relationship building. And I think I learned that from Therese Murray and from Vinnie DiMacedo. It's all about relationship building. And as you know, Steve, you saw when Tom Coulter was there and Tom O'Brien and Terry Murray and Vinnie DiMacedo, they all worked together for Plymouth. And they were, you know, on separate parties, but they all worked together for Plymouth. So, you know, you learn that and you're told that, you know, by Vinnie and Terry when you take the position. And they're right. It's all about the relationships, and it's all about getting what you can for the people of Plymouth. Yeah. Doesn't matter what the party is.
I think people want to see that. We're taping this in April of 2024, and Plymouth has just finished its town meeting. You were the featured speaker on behalf of the state delegation. Yeah. And one of the things that I think people were pleased about was that when you get up to speak, you introduced Kathleen Lenatra, the fellow state rep, and you also introduced another state rep from Falmouth who was not in your party, and I think that speaks volumes for, your willingness to work across the aisle as well.
Yeah, and it's also a respect issue too. I mean, Dylan Fernandez is an elected leader in the State House, just like I am, and deserves the respect to be acknowledged in a crowd like that. That yes, he's here to observe our town meeting.
So, you spoke at town meeting this year. Tell us a little bit about the highlights of your State of the State.
Yeah, so what we usually do is one of the three, either Senator Moran or myself or Kathy Muratore will rotate every year. It was my turn this year. And we capture information from both Kathy and from Senator Moran and kind of put it into one document and talk about it. And I think a lot of it, with the highlights from from the budget, some upcoming things that may be coming up with the budget. The tax, we talked about the tax breaks that Governor Healy signed back in October. We talked about the Municipality Power Act that's proposed that could help the town of Plymouth with more revenue sources, such as an excise tax, such as an additional meals tax, those type of things. So really, and then also some of the home rule legislation that town meeting has passed in the past, where it stands now at the state legislative level. So it's really trying to give everyone an update of where everything stands and where we think it's going. And of course, some of the lowlights is that, we have a $1 billion shortfall in the revenue. And so I did talk about that, although March, our revenues in the state went up. But this fiscal year coming up, we're working on the budget now for fiscal year 25. We're about to present it at the end of April. And hopefully by July we'll have a budget of percent, but it's not going to be as rosy as it's been in the last several years. There will be some cuts that will have to be made in social service programs and other programs. But just have to wait and see where they're going to be.
So a few years ago during COVID, we spent a lot more time together with our daily COVID shows, and I'm just wondering, Plymouth seems to be past that now, and I'm just wondering at the state level, does it seem to be the same way?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's. We've all learned to live with COVID just like you live with the flu. And people go get their vaccine in the wintertime to get a flu vaccine. They get a COVID vaccine if they choose to or not. But yeah, I think we're pretty much beyond that. A lot of lessons learned there. It's something that none of us ever went through before. But I think overall, it was a positive experience. What happened? I mean, it's always, you can always be a Monday morning quarterback and kind of criticize things that did happen at the time. But at the time when you're living through it, the decisions you're making are the best decisions you can make at the time with the information you have.
Yeah. I recently was speaking with Dr. Potvin, the chair of the Board of Health, and he was commenting how, looking back, there are probably a few things they would do differently the next time when it happens, because it probably will happen again.
Yeah. Hopefully not in our lifetime, though.
So you mentioned about being the sixth member of the select board and how that compares to other communities. 365 communities in the Commonwealth. How do you see Plymouth stacking up against some of the other towns?
Well, as you know, we are the largest town in Massachusetts by population and by acreage as well. And Plymouth has a very good reputation throughout the Commonwealth. I think the Plymouth 400 celebration that was going to happen has really elevated that, and that started with Senator Therese Murray way back in the 2010, 2011, really talking about Plymouth, and people understand what Plymouth is all about. But we have a really good reputation, and not just by colleagues, but also by administration like the Baker-Polito administration, the Healy administration. I mean, what's not to like about Plymouth when you come here? I tell people, you come to Plymouth, there's no reason to leave Plymouth. We even have an airport and a movie theater. There's so much to do, beaches, shops, restaurants, and all that. And people that come here just love coming here. And it's always interesting when you hear, particularly people that move, new people that move in, particularly in the Pine Hills. I always like to ask them, where did you move from? And why did you choose Plymouth? I ask that all the time. And it's interesting. People come really a lot from all over the state, mostly from in-state is when people come to Plymouth. But they heard about Plymouth, how great Plymouth was, and tourist area, but shops and restaurants and all that stuff. And they would always say, for the most part, that they looked at Cape Cod, but they figured, why go over the bridge when you have everything here in Plymouth?
Being in Plymouth, as I am, and pretty much not being outside of Plymouth, you certainly get a little bias and think, well, what a great place it is, and there's no place better. But certainly with the change over the years and the demographics that we have in Plymouth, I've noticed that in town meeting, we've got a lot of new town meeting members that are very participatory and bring a lot of new ideas. In my own church, we've had a lot of new members that have moved into the town, and it just seems as though the growth overall has brought in a lot of talent and good people into the community that are volunteering and serving in many ways.
I was just going to say that. When you look at the CAL, the Center for Active Living, and you see the amount of volunteers, that people that are there, it's amazing. It's amazing. I think in 2024 or 2023, when they did the volunteer luncheon, they presented a check to town manager Brindisi in the amount of like over $700,000, and that's the savings to the town on a yearly basis for the volunteer hours that are put in at the CAL. It's an amazing amount of people that come in that are somewhat semi-retired or retired, but young enough that they still want to be active and do things. As you know, the demographics in Plymouth with 63,000 plus people, over 40% are over the age of 60 years old. But it's a very active population that wants to get involved and volunteer, not just in government, but in other things as well. And you see that everywhere, which is wonderful.
So this year, 2024, is going to be your 10th and last year as our state rep.
Yeah.
And there are, I think, 4 people maybe that are running for your seat in one side and on the other side 1, so maybe at least 5 people. What do you see as important qualities to be in someone serving as a state representative?
I think it's someone to continue the legacy of what we built here in Plymouth, and that's working with people, being able to work across the side. As you know, Steve, we have a polarization of politics. We're on both sides, whether it's the far left or the far right, and everyone's entitled to their opinions, and that's fine. But you have to be able to learn to compromise and work with people in order to do that. You can't have your beliefs so staunch that you're not going to be willing to compromise and get things done. So I look at somebody that is able to do that, that is able to get both sides, because it's not just about being a Democrat or Republican. It's about being, who can get the most, who can work well with with everyone else to get the most of Plymouth.
So I know in my world as town moderator, the things that I have greatly appreciated by you, and in particular has to do with our representative town meeting. And so during COVID, you were instrumental in leading and helping us to be able to do the remote participation. And thereafter, we did vote for the hybrid model, which has been very successful. And you also were involved in helping us move that along in the legislature. So tell us a little bit about that and how you as a state representative can get involved on a local issue like that and help us get it to approval at the state level.
Yeah. So again, it's a relationship building. So it's the relationships that I built over the years that when that happened, we knew the people to talk to try to get this done. And it wasn't an easy thing to do.
It wasn't.
It wasn't easy because it wasn't really popular with people. But you make a case in a positive way of how it'd be beneficial. And in a lot of cases, I'll say, like in this case, well, we would like to just at least let's try it, let's see how it goes. And in this case, we did it during COVID, and it seemed to work well. PAC TV is wonderful, so if you have an access provider like we have in Plymouth, it helps make that a lot easier. What I found is there's a lot of communities that don't have that, so they couldn't do that. And if you remember correctly, we had the town of Brookline was here for a town meeting because they wanted to go that route as well.
Right.
And they weren't able to go that route at that time.
Right.
But we were. So
right.
we were. But I posed it as, let's do it as a trial. Let's try it here in Plymouth and see how it works.
Yeah. We really have been a model, and thank you again for letting us be in the forefront of that. So in 10 years, tell us some of the things that you're most excited about or you're proudest in terms of what you did either at the state level legislature as part of a law, or maybe what you brought back to Plymouth?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to the Plymouth 400 again, because that spent a lot of my legislative time was the Plymouth 400. And, you know, we calculated at one point, it was tens of millions of dollars we've been able to bring back to Plymouth. And I say we because it's not just me, you have to work with others to do this. But when you look at the infrastructure that we've created over the last decade, that was because of the Plymouth 400. The dredging that we did at the harbor, that we got money from the federal and the state part to do that. Now we have cruise ships coming in. When you look at all that combined and what we've been able to do and what we have now in Plymouth, if you can remember what it was like back in 2010 downtown, with the downtown, the waterfront, and what we were looking to build, I think that's what I'm proud of, what we've done together as a town and as a state and as colleagues, is we've been able to build this, you know, this wonderful community in the waterfront and in the downtown area. You know, our kids, you know, who are, you know, in the 20s and 30s, their nightlife is in Plymouth now. They don't go to Boston anymore.
Sure.
You know, because we've been able to create that. And you know, that's something that you know, I've been really proud to look at and proud to see that happen.
Sometimes people, I think that when you're an elected official, that you know, you're listening to your family, you're listening to maybe people in the party and so on. But seems to me that to be serving as you have in Plymouth, you really need to be connected to the community. So tell us a little bit about some of the groups in which you have been directly involved over and above just serving as a state rep.
Yeah. Well, it's important, and you were one of the ones that told me this, that, you know, it's really important to get involved in the community. And I did that when I was the administrator at the little Mayflower Nursing Home back in the early 2000s. I learned that early on, that you need to get involved in the community no matter what you're doing, whatever work you're doing. So I would get involved in you know, you got me into the Rotary Club, BNI, and so many other organizations. I'm still part of Rotary to this day. You know, I've been in the Knights of Columbus, and it's just, you know, it's not about just being out there. It's about giving back too. And if you can give back to your community, you know, while you're working in it as well, it's something that we teach our kids to try to do as well. So, but you know, it does help your career as well, because being out there in the community all the time, I'm convinced that, you know, it helped me get elected to where I am, because I've met so many people, and even the BNI group, you know, back in the early 2010s or whenever that was, I'm still friends with a lot of those people. I haven't been in that group in probably, you know, 8 years. But there's some great people in this community, and that's how you get to meet people and be out there.
And certainly it's natural when you've got 6 children, I would think. Certainly you're getting involved in your children's activities and the sports.
Yeah.
So that's the personal side, but then you've got the other side, the business. So, you know, I know you've been very involved in the Chamber of Commerce too in Plymouth and tourism, because this is very important as well. So it's really eclectic, a lot of different groups.
Absolutely, yeah. And they all kind of touch one another in some way or another. And, you know, my wife, Kristen, as you know, I mean, she's been involved in the Boosters Club and Parents Association. And again, it's all about giving back to the community and being out there. And, you know, it's really benefited us very well. The town's been very good to us.
What issues do you see coming up in the state that we need to be thinking about addressing?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. And of course, the biggest one is the migrant issue that we're having. You know, and people, you know, it's not about, I don't think it's about illegal immigration. It's about the migrants. It's about, okay, whether they're coming here illegally or not, that's not the issue in my book. The issue is, how are they being treated when they come here, okay? You know, we're putting them in conference rooms. We're putting them in on the airport, you know, putting them in hotels. Great. They're trying to make a better life. That's fine. But what we're not doing well is the financial part of this whole thing. It's costing a lot of money. It's costing us, this fiscal year will be about $1 billion by the time June 30th comes, which is now starting to take away from other programs. And it's about, you know, how do we get the federal government, because it's really the federal government's fault. The border crisis is not being addressed by the federal government. That's where it lies. And it's affecting us here in Massachusetts. Now, It's also affecting us in Massachusetts because we have a right to shelter. That was a law that was signed by Michael Dukakis when he was governor back in 1983, and that was meant to help families of Massachusetts if they came on hard times to get shelter.
Right.
Well, that has not been updated, so you just have to come to Massachusetts and be part of it. You know, we try to look at, you know, should we put a residency requirement in there that you need to be a resident for 6 months or 3 months or a year in order to qualify for that? Because what it's doing on the back end is pushing other people out that really need housing. And as you know, housing is probably the most critical item that's on the top of the agenda that we're trying to address. But that's not going to be addressed overnight. That's going to take, you know, 5, 10 years with changes in policies that are happening now on the local level as well as the state level. We're about 200,000 housing units short of where we should be at this time. With the policies that have been created by the governor, and I think will be passed by the House and the Senate soon, it'll create another 80 or 90,000 units, but we need to do more. So that the whole migrant issue causes the housing issue as well. So it's a complicated issue, but it's something that's on the forefront that we're all trying to address together.
Again, as we're taping this, we just came off of the annual town meeting, and actually last night we had quite a bit of discussion about housing in Plymouth. So a couple things. We had the affordable housing for Red Brook and for 130 Court, and then we also had the housing for the homeless and the coalition. And you're right, the migrant issue came up, and then we were, it was explained to us that this wasn't necessarily a migrant issue, that we have young families, women 20 and 30 with children and no place to be, and that really the migrant issue might be a little different. But talk to us a little bit about that and how you see Plymouth responding to this housing issue.
Yeah, so, and Sue Giovanetti, who's the director of the Plymouth Area Coalition for the Homeless, does a terrific job.
Yes.
And I'm glad that was explained that was separate. That has nothing to do with migrants. That's her organization that's expanding for people that, you know, live in this area that need it. I mean, and that's what's needed.
Right.
Where migrants are going to, like the hotel in Kingston.
Right.
You know, the state's paying for a lot of that, so that's a little bit different. So I think Plymouth, I think, is starting to catch on a little bit that we need this housing. I know there was an MBTA law that came into place, and you know, Plymouth had already built those Cottage Park, a lot of those apartments over where the MBTA train station is, and then this law comes in, it's like, how are we going to do this?
Right.
But it forces a community like Plymouth to figure out how to do that to add more housing. The accessory dwelling units that was just passed at town meeting as well, that's going to be another piece of this that could add, you know, more housing units as well. So it's really, and I started with the Baker-Polito administration. Now it's the Healy-Driscoll administration that are kind of forcing these issues on housing to try to get the communities involved and change zoning where you maybe only need half, you know, 50% vote instead of 2/3 vote for zoning changes. So a lot of people say yes, they want it, but a lot of people don't want it in their backyard.
Sure.
So it's that NIMBY thing that happens, but we all have to kind of work together to get more housing because it's just needed.
So Matt, this is your last year state rep because you're a candidate for state senate. So talk to us a little bit about what does that mean? I mean, this is Plymouth Profiles. We're taping this in Plymouth. What does it mean for Plymouth to have you leaving as a state rep and being a candidate for state senate?
Well, first of all, 10 years is a long time. And I thought, you know, when the opportunity came up, it was Vinny DiMacedo who called me to say, look at this, Sue Moran is going to be leaving and seat's going to be opening up. You should really think about it. And I thought about it the last time when Vinny left back in 2019, but it just wasn't right personally for our family. And so Kristen and I kind of talked about it a little bit. It was in mid-December. And we said, well, let's wait till the kids come home, you know, for Christmas, and we'll kind of talk to everyone together. And it seemed to make sense for everyone. At this point,
it does affect the whole family.
It affects the whole family in so many ways,
Right.
And by the time November of 2024 election comes around, the only one will be home will be Peyton, he'll be 17 at that point and be a junior. And, you know, Kristen has her own practice, her law practice. It's like, okay, so what am I going to do now? I can be the state rep, okay. I've sold the daycare centers, so I don't have that anymore. So everything was kind of falling into play, and it seemed like it would make sense. And so we decided to go for it. And at the end of January, we had 3 very successful events, kickoff events. One being in Plymouth. It was probably the biggest kickoff event I've ever had here in Plymouth, and it was just a fantastic turnout. And it's a great reception I'm receiving throughout the district from people. It is different though, because it's more than just Plymouth. Yeah, it includes Plimpton, Pembroke, and Kingston on this side of the bridge. Then it's Sandwich, Bourne, Mashpee, and Falmouth. But we have great roots in Falmouth. You know, I guess you know Kristen's families all live in Falmouth.
The Vokies.
All the Vokey families are from Falmouth, and they're still down there. And you know, Chris and I met in Falmouth. You know, I worked in Falmouth for years. We lived there. 4 of our kids, you know, were born at Falmouth Hospital, so we got a lot of roots there as well. And you know, and Plymouth and Falmouth are really the anchors of this district. And you know, that was another reason I said, you know, the whole thing kind of seems to make sense. Of course, you have to work at it, and you know, I always work at these races, and I'm very competitive, and I don't want to ever have any regrets at the end of the day, and I make sure I do everything possible. So at the end of the day, you know, if I lose, I said, you know, I did everything possible. You know, fortunately, I've won 7 races in a row, 2 select board, 5 as state rep, and we're going to go for an 8th one now.
So what are some of the things that you hope to do when you're a state senator that wouldn't be something you did as a state rep?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've been asked that a number of times, and it really goes to, well, why would you want to leave a state rep to go to a Senate? The Senate is smaller, so there's only 40 senators and 160 state reps, and I've been successful at the House and made a lot of connections, and same over the Senate. I know a lot of the senators. I've worked with a lot of senators on different bills as well. So
Probably some of them were state reps with you.
Exactly, some were state reps, exactly right, yeah. So I think going over the Senate and having a smaller group of folks to work with on legislation and things you need for your communities, I think would be a tremendous asset to the whole district, particularly somebody like myself who's been there 10 years already and has built that and knows the district pretty well.
Yeah. So currently when you're acting as state rep, do you still participate with any local officials such as the town manager, the superintendent, or do you participate with any local elected officials? I mean, I know you and I talk whenever we need to, certainly when it relates to town meeting, but what about other elected officials or staff in the town?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the time we do, all the time. You know, whenever there's grants available, we always make sure Tiffany Park gets that because she's in charge of that.
Person.
Yeah, Derek Merdisi and I, you know, we're texting almost every other day about different things and what he needs or what we're looking for, how we can help them. It's all about us supporting the town in any way possible. Same with the select board members or planning board people, whoever, whatever their needs are. So much so that I was in Pembroke back in March, and at an event, and it was a campaign event, somebody running for a select board, I think it was, and I was asked, since there's no, this Josh Cutler has left that position, he's now working for the administration, so there's no state rep out of Pembroke. And they said, hey, we hear that you work well with your community. Would you help us if there's a need in Pembroke? Because we don't have a rep. Absolutely. So between Kathy Lenatra and myself, we'll be glad to help in any way we can. It was actually the assistant town manager that reached out and talked about it. Yeah, so it's that's what we do. We're there to support the town. And I'm always very careful not to interject myself in the business of the town. I have opinions about certain things, whether it's articles on town meetings and all that, but I'm very careful not to interject myself on that and just to give the facts to people, because even though I think I'm a sick select person, I'm really not. And I don't want to influence one way or another, but I want to be sure that I'm getting the proper information to whether it's elected officials or people in the community. Because as you know, 90% of the job of what we do is helping people in the community. Right. People don't realize that. They think it's it's just taking the votes. We don't, if we go to vote twice a month, that's a lot. Yeah. Everything else is done in the district. We got a call, today from a woman who had a telephone pole that's been lying on her front lawn for like 3 months now. There was a car accident or whatever, and it's still sitting there. Can you help us get rid of it? Sure, let's make some calls. It's about connecting people to get the answers they need.
Well, and with that, who do you have there working side by side with you in your office?
Well, I wouldn't say it's side by side. I say she actually runs the whole thing. It's
Exactly.
Betty De Benedictis.
Yeah.
Betty has been, she's a real fixture at the State House. She's been there, 16, 17 years now. She first started out with Tom Coulter. And you talk about relationship building and people that know her. It's amazing. And she was, I was lucky to be able to get her when Tom Coulter was leaving. I had an opening at the time, and she lives in Plymouth, but being a new rep, having somebody that has the experience that she has and the people she knows and how to get through government, it's a huge benefit. It's a huge benefit because there was no learning curve at that point.
So is she the only staff person that you have?
She's the only one we have at this point, yeah. And we've had some interns in the past that have helped out as well. But when you go to the Senate, you end up having 5 people. So the House is a little bit lighter than the Senate. The Senate, you have more staff, so.
We mentioned about the dealings with officials and with government boards and committees. What about other groups like the Chamber of Commerce? I mean, I know in the past I've seen you at Chamber events.
Yeah.
Do you work closely with the Chamber of Commerce?
I work with, so I'm a member of Chamber of Commerce, but work with, Amy and Bob and the staff there on different, different issues. Same with C. Plymouth, with Lee Filson and tourism, work with them. The Arts, Project Arts, work with them. You work with all these groups for whatever's needed. Again, don't interject myself, but they know I'm there if something is needed. A lot of issues we've had in the past with DCR, whether it's concerts on DCR property or whether it's, the Chamber having their summer festival, so we've had those conversations. Matter of fact, this past week we'd had representatives from DCR in at Town Hall to meet with the elected officials, the town manager, and others about how do we have better communication around the DCR property down by the Rock and the wharf down that area. How do we all get together better? Town has made it very clear they really want to buy that land back. But in the meantime, while they're working on that, how do we work better communication so that we can utilize that beautiful park down there on the waterfront, and not have a lot of hassles by using it.
So the Senate district that you've talked about, if it goes from Falmouth to Plymouth or up towards Pembroke, what brings that district together? I mean, it's not like it's all towns in the Cape because of the bridge and then some towns over here. So you get towns on one side of the bridge, the other side of the bridge. What would be a common denominator? I mean, strikes me that one would be tourism.
It is tourism, yeah, and the bridges themselves. It's not a symbol, it's a fact that the bridges are really a commonality between both sides, really, and particularly Plymouth on this side of the bridge. As you know, there's enough funding, or there's almost enough funding to replace the Sagamore Bridge now. So we're hoping that with a little bit more funding from the federal government, that we could start the Sagamore Bridge replacement by 2027, 2028. It would have been nice to do both bridges, but I think it was smart on Governor Healy to say, well, let's don't wait for money for both. Let's do what we have now and do one for now, and keep doing that. But that, the bridge issue itself is really, particularly on the Cape side, because you don't want people, like I mentioned earlier, about people that want to live in Plymouth. They don't want to deal with the traffic on the Cape going over those bridges. It's a real issue. It's a real issue. Even though tourism is still good in the Cape, if it could be better because of the issue of the traffic is not going to be as great for people, then that's going to help them as well.
What are the plans for this Sagamore Bridge? Is it going to look the same? Is it going to be a little different?
I haven't seen any plans for it to see what it's going to look like, but it's going to be a lot wider.
So there'll be more lanes?
There'll be more lanes, exactly, yes. Yeah, and it'd be a better route to kind of get over, and not so much that you're having to try to merge all in to have it all jammed up, so, yeah.
So we don't have a date yet, but it's
no, they're looking at 2027, 2028. They just need a little bit more funding from the federal government, and then we'll be able to get going with that.
And so for you personally, what are some issues that you'd like to see also tackled?
Well, again, I think as we talked about, I think housing, I think that's probably the biggest one, is just really let's continue to have a concentration on the housing. And continue to work with communities on that to try to get more housing, better quality housing, affordable housing. I think also mental health, we haven't touched upon that, but you know, as you know, mental health has always been an issue, but COVID really exacerbated it more so. And we passed a major mental health bill back in 2023, but there's still more to be done. And we need to have better access, more access for mental health providers. We're starting to now get loan forgiveness for people that are willing to work in the industry for mental health. We're starting to see that insurance companies will start treating mental health, behavioral health the same as physical health, because a lot of times, you know, the money that physicians get is a lot less in mental health or behavioral health than physical health. But studies have shown that if you treat people in the front end for mental health, the physical end goes away. It doesn't go away, it gets less. So it's not like you're going to be spending more money in the system. It's just you're shifting it to where it really needs to be. But if you're not dealing with a person who has mental health issues, then of course it's going to cause physical health for them.
So Matt, if people wanted to contact you, because you talked a lot about constituent service, you know, how would they do that?
I always give out my cell phone number because it's a lot easier, which is 508-930-2979. People call or text, or we get emails all the time. It just I always like getting the contacts directly instead of trying to go through the email through the State House, which Betty is great at. She'll respond to them right away if people do that. But if you've got an immediate need, just reach out to me directly, or Betty directly, either one. And people say, "Oh, well, where's your office?" Like I never believed in having an office. Again, being one community and just Plymouth, it didn't make sense to have an office. So I'll meet people wherever they want to be, whether it's at their house or Panera Bread or the library or wherever they want to go, whatever's easier for them. Because again, if they have the issue, it's all about customer service. If they have an issue, why would I make it difficult for them to meet with me? I want to make it as easy as possible to help them with their issue.
How many days a week would you say you're in Boston? How often are you in Plymouth?
More often in Plymouth than Boston. Very rarely in Boston. Again, if we meet twice a month to go into session to vote on something, that's a lot. We do have committee meetings, though, once in a while, but those can be Zoom or in person. I like to go in person on those. So I think maybe on average, if it's once a week, that's a lot, but the bulk of the work is all done in the community.
And what's the email address?
It's Matthew, with one T, .Muratore, M-U-R-A-T-O-R-E, @mahouse.gov.
Okay. So Matt, when you're not doing your work as a state rep, what are some of the things you like to do personally?
Well, we like to, go to the beach, go on vacation. We have a granddaughter now who's 2.5. Usually
That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Every Saturday night, we have her every Saturday night. It's just, it's so much fun as she begins to get older and gets a personality and all. And
Talking,
and just
walking.
talking back and it's just spending time with the family, quality time with the family. Like to get out and golf whenever I can, but there's not a lot of free time to do a lot of that. But so it's just anything outdoors.
So we're taping this in April. The election is in November. What do you see for yourself between now and November?
Yeah, it's been. So since January 23rd, it's been almost every single day. And it is a big difference having 7 other communities to campaign in. Still trying to maintain the state rep job, which, that's the main thing, to keep doing the state rep job, and then working around that to do things in other communities. And it's all about meeting people. It's relationships, as I talked about. And it's meeting people in all these different communities and try to get to different events that are happening there. And it's almost at this point every night and weekends. And this past weekend, I had 2 events on Saturday, 2 events on Sunday. But it's important to get out there and do that. And again, without forgetting, Plymouth, the roots that are here as well. So, and I always remember one thing that Vinny always told me too. Whenever you have an opportunity to talk about Boston, being in Boston or Plymouth, and Boston's not a vote, always choose Plymouth. So I remember that for this Senate race as well. Always choose. If there's something in Boston that can wait or happen another time, and doesn't have to do a vote, then do it in the district. So I'm trying to do everything I can in all these other communities to be around. There was one day a couple of weeks ago, I had an event in Pembroke at 6 o'clock, and I needed to be in Mashpee at 7:30. And I told Mashpee I'd be there a little bit later, so I got there like 10 minutes of 8, but I made both. But it's important, I think, for people to know who I am, learn who I am, and it's more important for me to know who they are, what their community is like. And every community is different. Every community is not like Plymouth. Every community has their own face to it. But it's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I like meeting people anyway. So it's a lot of fun meeting a lot of
So
people.
tell us a little bit about your voting record. You have a record as to how many votes you've made?
Yeah, I think before this session ends, which ends July 31st, I think we're going to make 2,000 votes. Yeah, so it would have been 2,000 votes. I'm almost there. It's 1960 or 1950 votes.
And
at
where
this
do you
point.
stand in terms of the percentage of votes cast as compared to the number?
I've only missed 2 votes, and it was 2 years ago. We had a pre-planned vacation with the entire family to Italy last year, and we were leaving on a Friday. For some reason, we never go in on Friday. We got called in on a Friday, and I'm sorry, it was a Thursday. It was a Thursday, and we got called in on a Thursday, and it wasn't any major legislation. One was a roll call vote, and one was something else. But I don't know. I was trying to figure out a way how I could let the family go to Italy on Thursday, and I'll catch up with them on Friday, but it just wasn't going to work. And Brad Jones, who's the minority leader, says, "Don't worry about it. It's okay if you miss 2 votes."
So during COVID, did you have some remote participation?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Everything was remote at that point because you had to keep government going.
Yeah, but no hybrid now?
No hybrid. The Senate does, though, which is another thing I looked at. Like, oh, the Senate does have hybrid. Okay, so the Senate will do hybrid but the House vote decided not to do that.
So they
Now
actually,
we can for committee meetings on the House side, though.
Yeah.
But not for House votes.
I'm surprised that the House didn't go with a hybrid for their votes.
Well, the House is controlled by the majority of the Democrats, and then they decide, how this is going to be, and which is the same on the Senate side, which is kind of strange that the Senate decided to go along with it, but the House didn't. But I think, too, though, in fairness, I think a lot of it has to do with the amount of House members there are. There's 160. With 40 senators, it's probably a little bit easier to do remote than it is with 160 House members, because that was a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of hybrid at every level, both in my professional life as well as in the life as a town official.
And I saw at town meeting, too, so at 162 town meeting members, you still had 30 or 40 people that were on Zoom.
We did last,
Which is
I
good.
think
And that's
last night we were up to maybe 137, 162, and
Yeah.
that's really resulted in higher attendance at all of our sessions
sure.
because, people that are sick can still participate at home if they have other issues.
And that struck me when I was at town meeting Saturday about the number of people that were on Zoom and the number of people there and the high number that were participating. And I'm like, well, we're the same in the House. There's 160 House members, same as in Plymouth, 162 town meeting members. Why can't we do it in the House?
Sure.
And do that option as well. I mean, if you think of it,
of
think
course.
of people that are coming from Pittsfield, like tomorrow we have to be in session for like 5 minutes to take one vote. So everyone's got to drive in. If you're from Pittsfield and you're driving into Boston for one vote for 5 minutes,
And it's deceiving. I mean, on Saturday afternoon, at one point, there was a motion to adjourn, and then we went to a recess, and we came back. We were still, the quorum is presumed, and somebody looked around the room and jumped up and said, "I question the quorum." And sure enough, we had a quorum count, and even though the room didn't look full, we had a quorum. And the reason we had a quorum was because we were hybrid.
people on
And
Zoom.
we had, as you said, 30 or 40 people that weren't in the room, but they were logged in and they're participating. So we made a quorum. So, compared to the past, we're not really running into quorum issues, particularly late in the day when we go more than 8 hours.
Yeah, right.
But it seems like it would be something that would be benefit. If you could, have a magic wand, I mean, what were some things, is there any things you'd want to change about Plymouth?
Anything I want to change about Plymouth? I wish there'd be more discussion about the form of government. And I know we've talked about this before. And I just think Plymouth is at a point now where it really needs to change. As I said, it's the largest town, the largest square footage, square acreage of land mass. And I really wish we'd have a real discussion about doing that. And I'm not saying it has to be a mayor form of government, but something to make it easier, because I mean, you look at the town meetings and everything, you have to wait for so many things. And the most you can actually do is 3 town meetings in a year if you wanted to. You know, so if there's this way we could actually look at that. And that, every time people say that all the time, why isn't this town more of a, you know, why is it still a town? Why isn't it a city or something? But, you know, it could be a town council or something, and a strong town manager or something, but it just needs to be more efficient, I think. I think we've just outgrown what we've done.
Well, and I have always agreed with you on that, but I think one of the problems is we run such a good town meeting.
Well, stop running such a good town meeting.
That people think, you know, it's working and
Yeah.
it broke, why fix it? But we do have a charter review committee, they're
Yeah,
not a
right.
commission.
Right.
So there's only so much they can do,
Right.
but, you know, David Golden is chairing that, and, you know, I know they're gonna have some recommendations
Yeah.
for the town in October, but it's true, it's still not gonna really change
Yeah.
the form of government.
Yeah, he's done a good job with that too. And actually, he was. You talk about you know, how I get involved. I was called by him. I never met him before, but I was called by him to come to the first meeting of the Charter Review Committee, just to get from a state perspective, you know, what can and can't be done.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, and we kind of been working together since on that.
So change at the state level, what would you do if you could just have a wand and just say, I want to change something?
I wish, you know, I wish I wish the way the House and the Senate were run a little bit different to allow people to vote the way they want to vote. And what I mean by that, if you are, and this is just my observation, if you're a Republican in Massachusetts, as you said, we're a minority party, there's 24 out of 160 reps right now. We vote the way we should vote for our communities. But I talk to a lot of my Democratic colleagues who, a lot of different votes they would love to take a different side on, but they can't go against the speaker.
Okay.
Because it could be perceived as, whether it's real or not, I don't know, but the perception is that that may hurt me, you know, try to move up in the House if I don't go along with the speaker. I just wish, you know, they were just more open about that so people could vote the way they want for their communities. Now, some reps have. Like the gun bill is always a bone of contention with folks on both sides of the aisle. But there were Democrats that voted against the gun bill on the House side. And it took a lot of guts to do that, but they had to do it because it was for their community. Kathy Lenatra was one of them. It was, you know, their community, the way their community wants you to vote, because I think we miss the vote sometimes when we're not voting the way the community wants us to vote. I always vote on something based on what I see as emails, calls, texts, or whatever, what people. If the majority of people tell me, no, don't vote on something, I may think differently about it, but if that's the way my constituents, the way I'm reading it, I've got to vote that way. I've always been that way. So I'm happy that I can actually do that, but others just don't feel, they feel like they're handcuffed, that they can't do that. I just wish it would be more open and more transparent.
So we talked earlier, I mentioned about how you were acknowledging Kathy Lenatra and the other state representative at the town meeting, but give us some examples of how you have worked hand in hand with Representative Lenatra for Plymouth or our senator from Plymouth.
A lot of, the biggest thing we do is earmarks together. And earmarks are items that we add to the budget, that we fight for in the budget for our community. And any time there's a discussion, like when the budget season started in January, February this year, we reached out to the town and said, okay, what are your needs? And then the three of us kind of say, okay, why don't you try this, you try to go for that, or we'll go for this, and we'll all co-sponsor. So we'll co-sponsor everything, but we try to divvy it up to see the most we can get for everyone. The other thing we do is, as you know, we do citations to people for special occasions and all that, and we'll always try to coordinate with each other office so that we're all on it together. I think it's important that people see the unity, with the people that they're representing them. I know that part of what I'm finding on the campaign trail with the Senate race is there's some folks that really didn't like the fact that I did a commercial with Kathy Lenatra and Josh Cutler back in October 2022. But what I explained to him was that in my district of Plymouth, it was important that year to show that I work across the aisle with people.
Absolutely.
And that helped me get the highest percentage of votes ever. Now, other people are saying, well, you did that because you were endorsing them. It wasn't an endorsement of them. It was them helping me to say I work across the aisle, and same with them, that they were able to work across the aisle as well. So it's really trying to show people that, because I think that's what the majority of the people that vote for us want. They don't want what is happening in Washington. They want their legislators to work for them to get things done.
And you mentioned citations, and people don't always realize the time that we all spend in the community. So Saturday, after a full day of 8 hours of town meeting, you and I were still at another Plymouth event that night. You gave a citation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Mike Muratore, a great friend of ours, former chief of police here in Plymouth, was honored by the Adele Manfredi Award, who I know you worked with on the school committee for years, from the Plymouth Education Foundation. They honor one person every year for the dedication to the schools, and I was so pleased to be there with Mike and present the citation on behalf of, that was offered by Senator Moran, and presented to Mike as a friend and a colleague for 20 years. And it was just so well deserved that he was able to get that.
And we talked earlier at the start about family and the support of that. I know I spent part of my time that night congratulating his wife Cheryl, because really, in order for Mike to do what he has done, his wife has been right
So
there
true.
with him.
It's so true, yeah.
Alongside.
Yeah, and people forget about that. Like you said earlier, it's, the family's a big component of what we do.
Yeah.
And people don't usually see that. They don't usually see the effects of that.
Yeah.
And particularly being polarized as we are sometimes in politics, people really need to understand that we are real people, and we have real families, and we have real feelings, and our families have real feelings as well. We could agree to disagree on something, but let's don't go too far about it.
And Matt, as one final thought, if you want to leave for people that maybe didn't join us in the beginning, what's the one thing that you want as a takeaway from today's conversation?
Just that, it's something. This is a great community that we have. I love this community. I love working for this community, as I have the last 20 years. Hopefully I'll be fortunate enough to win the Senate race, so I can continue to do that work that I love to do, and hope I can get people rallied around me to do that.
Good. Matt Muratore,
right.
Plymouth State
Thank you, Steve.
Representative. Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
very much for joining us today. We're glad to have State Representative Matt Muratore. We wish him well in his future endeavors. And thank you all for joining us. This is an edition of Plymouth Profiles coming to you during 2024. We hope you'll join us for future presentations. We're going to continue with this throughout the year. My name is Steve Trifletti. I am Plymouth Town Moderator, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.